My name is Skylar. I'm 34, a senior architect at Davis Hammond, one of the city's most prestigious architectural firms. I design sleek, modern buildings that punctuate the skyline with glass and steel, creating spaces where people work, live, and play. I'm good at what I do, meticulous in my planning, innovative in my approach, and confident in my presentations. My professional life is exactly where I want it to be. My personal life, however, is another story entirely. I've been single for 2 years, ever since my 5-year relationship with Marcus ended when he accepted a position in Tokyo. We tried long distance for 3 months before mutually agreeing that the relationship had run its course. Since then, I've thrown myself into my work, using 60-hour weeks and ambitious projects as excuses to avoid dating. The occasional hookup or first date that never led to a second became my new normal. I told myself I was too busy for anything serious, that my career needed my full attention. Which was all fine until the invitation arrived. You're invited to celebrate the marriage of Elizabeth Hammond and Nicholas Chun. Elizabeth Hammond, the daughter of Richard Hammond, founding partner and my direct supervisor. The same Elizabeth who had interned at the firm 3 summers ago, who I'd mentored and remained friendly with even after she decided architecture wasn't her path and pursued interior design instead. The same Elizabeth who had specifically requested that I be invited to her intimate destination wedding in wine country, complete with +1. The +1 was the problem. In a firm where personal connections and networking were as important as talent, attending solo would lead to inevitable questions and well-meaning but uncomfortable setup attempts from colleagues. I could already imagine Richard's wife, Marianne, trying to introduce me to every eligible friend or family member at the reception. I briefly considered asking one of my friends to accompany me, but most were either in relationships or would find it difficult to take time off for a 3-day wedding weekend on short notice. Online dating seemed too rushed. I didn't want to bring someone I barely knew to such an important event. That's when Jason, my closest friend at the firm, made a suggestion over lunch that initially seemed ridiculous but grew more appealing the more I considered it. "Why don't you hire someone?" he asked, lowering his voice despite the privacy of our corner table at the bistro across from our office. "There are services for this kind of thing." "You mean like an escort?" I replied, nearly choking on my sparkling water. "I can't bring a sex worker to my boss's daughter's wedding." Jason rolled his eyes. "Not that kind of escort. There are legitimate companion services, professional +1s. People who are good at social events, know how to make conversation, and can play whatever role you need for the occasion. No sex involved unless you both decide that independently after the contract ends." I was skeptical, but Jason insisted it was becoming common practice, especially in high-pressure professional environments. "Think of it as hiring an actor for a specific role," he explained. "Someone charming and presentable who can navigate a social event without embarrassing you." That night, after staring at the RSVP card for an hour, I found myself searching online for professional +1 services. To my surprise, several legitimate-looking companies appeared, offering everything from networking event companions to wedding date professionals. One in particular caught my eye, Companion Connect, which emphasized its rigorous vetting process and professional clientele. Before I could overthink it, I filled out their intake form, detailing the event, 3-day destination wedding, professional setting, need for someone comfortable in upscale social situations. My preferences: male, age 25 to 40, conversational, able to convincingly play the role of a romantic partner, and my own background: architect, 34, attending boss's daughter's wedding. The next day, I received an email from their client coordinator, suggesting we schedule a consultation call to discuss my needs in detail. The professionalism of their approach was reassuring, making what had initially seemed like a desperate move feel more like a practical solution to a specific problem. During the call, I was paired with a consultant who asked thoughtful questions about the event, the impression I wanted to make, and the kind of rapport I hoped to establish with my companion. She explained their process. I would be matched with several potential companions based on compatibility, review their profiles, and then meet my top choice for coffee to determine if we had the necessary chemistry to pull off a convincing partnership. "Think of it as an accelerated first date," she explained. "You'll know within 15 minutes if you can credibly present as a couple. If not, we'll arrange a meeting with your second choice." A week later, I was sitting in an upscale coffee shop downtown, nervously checking my watch every few minutes while waiting for Damien, the companion whose profile had most appealed to me. According to his bio, he was 31, had a background in hotel management and customer service, spoke 3 languages, and specialized in professional events and family gatherings. His photo showed a man with warm brown eyes, an easy smile, and the kind of conventionally attractive features that would draw attention without seeming out of place beside me. At precisely 2 p.m., a man matching his photo walked through the door, surveyed the room, and approached my table with confident strides. "Skylar," he asked, his voice pleasantly deep with just a hint of an accent I couldn't immediately place. I stood, extending my hand. "Yes, you must be Damien." His handshake was firm but not aggressive, his smile reaching his eyes in a way that immediately put me at ease. Up close, I could see that his profile photo hadn't fully captured the warmth of his expression or the subtle intelligence in his gaze. "It's a pleasure to meet you," he said, taking the seat opposite mine. "I appreciate you taking the time for this meeting before making your decision." There was something refreshingly direct about his approach, no pretense that this was anything other than what it was, a business transaction with personal elements. "Of course," I replied. "It seems important to establish some rapport before spending 3 days pretending we're in a relationship." He smiled again, a flash of perfect teeth. "Exactly. And to address the awkwardness head-on. This is an unusual situation, but it doesn't have to be uncomfortable." Over the next hour, what I had expected to be a brief, practical meeting evolved into one of the most engaging conversations I'd had in months. Damien asked thoughtful questions about my work, my relationship with the bride and her family, and what I hoped to achieve by bringing him as my +1. He took notes in a small leather-bound notebook, occasionally offering suggestions about how we might present our relationship to make it believable. "How long have we been together?" he asked, pen poised above paper. 6 months seems ideal, long enough to justify bringing me to an important event, but recent enough that not everyone would know about me yet." I nodded, impressed by his strategic thinking. 6 months works. "How did we meet?" "The simplest stories are easiest to maintain," he advised. "Perhaps through a mutual friend? Or at a charity event related to your industry?" We settled on a story that contained elements of truth for ease of remembering. We'd met at a gallery opening through a mutual friend, Jason, who had agreed to corroborate if necessary, had been dating exclusively for 6 months, and were still in that pleasant stage of a relationship where everything feels promising but commitments remain light. By the time we'd finished our coffee and worked through the logistics, I felt surprisingly comfortable with Damien. His professionalism was evident, but there was also a genuine warmth to his interactions that suggested he might actually enjoy the weekend beyond its professional requirements. "I think this could work," I said as we prepared to leave. "Your background in hospitality clearly serves you well in this role." Damien smiled, a hint of something more complex flickering across his features. "I enjoy helping people navigate difficult social situations. Everyone needs support sometimes, even if they have to hire it." There was no judgment in his tone, only understanding, which alleviated some of the lingering embarrassment I felt about the arrangement. We finalized the details over email the following day. His fee, substantial but not unreasonable given the 3-day commitment. Travel arrangements. We would drive up together to maintain our cover story. And expectations. He would act as my partner in public settings, but maintain professional boundaries in private. The weekend of the wedding arrived faster than I anticipated. Between finalizing a major project at work and preparing for the event, I barely had time to second-guess my decision before I was picking Damien up outside his apartment building on Friday morning. He was waiting on the sidewalk with a sleek weekend bag and garment carrier, dressed casually but impeccably in dark jeans and a light blue button-down that complemented his olive complexion. He smiled when he saw me, and I felt an unexpected flutter of attraction that I quickly attributed to pre-event nerves. "Good morning," he said, sliding into the passenger seat after storing his luggage in the trunk. "Ready for our weekend of romantic deception?" His playful tone made me laugh, easing the tension I hadn't realized I was carrying. "As ready as I'll ever be. Thank you again for doing this. It's literally my job," he reminded me with a smile. "But I appreciate the sentiment." The drive to wine country took just over 2 hours, during which Damien proved to be an excellent conversationalist. He asked questions about my work that showed genuine interest rather than polite obligation, shared entertaining stories from his hospitality days, carefully anonymized to protect client privacy, and offered insights about architecture that revealed an unexpected knowledge of the field. How do you know so much about design principles? I asked after he made a particularly astute observation about a recently completed building we passed. I studied hotel management and hospitality design, he explained. Understanding how spaces work is crucial in that field. Plus, I enjoy learning about my clients' professions. It makes conversations more authentic. By the time we reached the luxury resort where the wedding festivities would take place, I felt more at ease with Damien than I had with actual dates in recent memory. His combination of professionalism and personal warmth created a comfortable dynamic that I hoped would translate convincingly to others. The first test came immediately upon check-in, when we encountered Richard and Marianne Hammond in the lobby. "Skylar," Richard boomed, approaching with outstretched hand. "So glad you could make it. Elizabeth will be thrilled." I shook his hand, hyper-aware of Damien standing beside me. "Wouldn't miss it." "Richard, Marianne, I'd like you to meet Damien, my partner." Damien stepped forward with perfect timing, offering a warm smile and firm handshake. "It's a pleasure to meet you both. Skylar speaks so highly of you, and I've been looking forward to finally putting faces to names." The ease with which he delivered this line, suggesting an established relationship where my colleagues were already familiar concepts in his life, was impressive. Even more impressive was the way he subtly placed his hand at the small of my back as he spoke, a gesture of intimate familiarity that felt both natural and convincing. "Well, we're delighted you could join us," Marianne said, clearly pleased. "We've been hoping Skylar would bring someone special to one of these events. He's always so focused on work." I felt my cheeks warm at the gentle reprimand, but Damien smoothly interjected, "That dedication is one of the things I admire most about him, though I do occasionally have to remind him there's life outside the office." Richard laughed appreciatively. "Good man. Someone needs to keep our star architect balanced. We don't want him burning out." The conversation continued for a few more minutes before they excused themselves to greet other arriving guests. As they walked away, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "That went well," Damien observed quietly. "They seemed genuinely pleased to meet me." "You were perfect," I admitted. The hand on the back was a nice touch. He smiled, a professional assessment in his eyes. "Physical contact is important for believability, but it needs to seem natural. I'll maintain an appropriate level of affection throughout the weekend, but always let me know if anything makes you uncomfortable." The calculated nature of his response was a sharp reminder of our arrangement, dampening the strange sense of genuine connection I'd been feeling. "Of course. Thank you for your thoroughness." If he noticed my slight withdrawal, he didn't show it. "Shall we check in and get settled before the welcome reception?" Our room, a spacious suite with vineyard views, featured a king-sized bed that suddenly seemed very prominent. Damien, ever the professional, immediately addressed the potential awkwardness. "I can sleep on the sofa, or we can request a roll-away bed if you prefer," he offered, setting his bag on the luggage rack. "Whatever makes you most comfortable." "The sofa converts to a queen bed," I pointed out. "That should be fine unless you'd prefer the roll-away." "The sofa bed is perfect," he assured me. "I've slept in far worse conditions during my hotel management days." We unpacked in companionable silence, moving around each other with surprising ease for two people who had met only once before. Damien was meticulous but efficient, hanging his garment bag contents in the closet and arranging toiletries with practiced precision. "The welcome reception starts in an hour," I said, checking the itinerary. "Business casual." Damien nodded. "I'll take a quick shower if that's all right with you." "Of course. Make yourself at home." While he showered, I found myself staring out at the vineyard, questioning my decision to hire a companion rather than simply attending alone. The initial interactions had gone smoothly. Too smoothly, perhaps, creating an illusion of genuine connection that made the transactional nature of our arrangement increasingly uncomfortable. Damien emerged from the bathroom in pressed chinos and a different button-down, his damp hair neatly styled, a subtle cologne adding to his polished presentation. The sight of him, attractive, put together, playing the role of my partner with such conviction, stirred something unexpected in me. "You look nice," I said, immediately feeling foolish for complimenting someone who was literally paid to present well. But his smile seemed genuine. Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself. The welcome reception was held on a terrace overlooking the vineyards, string lights creating a warm glow as the sun began to set. Elizabeth spotted me immediately, rushing over to embrace me with genuine affection. Skylar, I'm so happy you're here, she exclaimed before turning curious eyes to Damien. And you must be the mysterious boyfriend I've heard nothing about, because someone never shares personal details at work. I laughed, the sound only slightly forced. Elizabeth, this is Damien. Damien, the bride-to-be, Elizabeth. Congratulations, Damien said warmly, taking her hand. Your venue choice is spectacular. The way the western light hits these hills at sunset is absolutely magical. Elizabeth looked delighted. An architecture enthusiast? Skylar, you finally found someone who speaks your language. He has many wonderful qualities, Damien replied with a fond glance in my direction that seemed so authentic it momentarily took my breath away. His passion for design is just one of them. The evening progressed with similar moments, Damien charming my colleagues, remembering details about their projects that I'd mentioned during our drive, placing a hand on my arm or shoulder at perfectly timed intervals. He was, by any measure, excelling at his role. What I hadn't anticipated was how it would feel to be the recipient of such focused attention, even knowing it was professional rather than personal. Damien listened when I spoke, laughed at my industry jokes that usually fell flat with non-architects, and created small moments of privacy within the larger gathering, leaning in to whisper observations or gentle teasing comments that established a sense of intimate partnership. By the time we returned to our suite, slightly tipsy from excellent wine and the strange euphoria of successfully navigating the first event, I was thoroughly confused by my own reactions. You were incredible tonight, I said as I loosened my tie. Everyone was completely convinced. Damien smiled, removing his watch and placing it carefully on the bedside table. That's the goal. Did you notice Richard's approving nods whenever we interacted? I think he's genuinely pleased to see you with someone. I hadn't noticed, but it didn't surprise me. Richard had made occasional comments about work-life balance over the years, his way of expressing concern for my all-consuming focus on the job. Well, mission accomplished for day one, I said, suddenly aware of the domesticity of preparing for bed together. Do you need anything for the sofa bed? Extra pillows. I'm all set, thank you. He paused, studying me with those perceptive eyes. Skylar, I want to check in. How are you feeling about how things went tonight? The question caught me off guard. Good? You were perfect. What? Because this is an unusual situation, and sometimes clients have unexpected reactions to the public performance aspects. It can feel strange to have someone acting affectionately toward you when you know it's not entirely genuine. His insight was uncomfortable in its accuracy. It's fine. A bit surreal, perhaps, but that's to be expected. Damien nodded, accepting my answer without pressing further. Just remember, you're in control of this scenario. If anything feels wrong or uncomfortable, we can adjust. I appreciated his professionalism even as I found myself wishing for something less controlled, less considered. Thank you. Good night, Damien. Good night, Skylar. The next day brought the rehearsal lunch, followed by free time for guests to enjoy the resort amenities before the rehearsal dinner. Damien and I fell into an easy rhythm, maintaining our couple performance in public while establishing comfortable boundaries in private. During our free afternoon, we decided to take advantage of the resort's wine tasting, joining a small group tour of the vineyard and cellars. It was here, away from my colleagues and the immediate pressure of the wedding events, that I began to see glimpses of Damien beyond his professional facade. When the sommelier described the soil composition that gave their Pinot Noir its distinctive minerality, Damien asked questions that revealed a genuine interest in viticulture. As we walked between rows of grapevines, he paused to examine the trellis system, commenting on its efficiency with the enthusiasm of someone who appreciated thoughtful design. And when a sudden breeze sent a woman's hat flying, he reacted with instinctive kindness, retrieving it before it could be damaged. These small moments, authentic rather than performative, made me increasingly curious about the real person behind the professional companion. How did you get into this line of work? I asked as we sat on a terrace after the tour, enjoying glasses of the vineyard's reserve blend. Damien considered the question, swirling his wine thoughtfully. After hotel management, I worked as an event coordinator for a while. I was often asked to balance uneven dinner parties or fill in when someone canceled last minute. I discovered I had a talent for adapting to different social situations and helping people feel comfortable. He shrugged lightly. When I learned there was an actual market for professional companions, it seemed like a natural transition. Do you enjoy it? Usually, he said with surprising candor. I meet interesting people, attend events I might not otherwise experience, and use my social skills in ways that genuinely help others. He took a sip of wine before adding, though some assignments are certainly more enjoyable than others. And where does this one fall on that spectrum? I asked, immediately regretting the question. It was unfair to put him in a position where honesty might conflict with professional courtesy. But Damien just smiled, something genuine warming his expression. Near the top, actually. You're respectful, interesting to talk to, and you haven't once treated me like a service provider rather than a person. That's unfortunately rare. His answer pleased me more than it should have, given our arrangement. I reminded myself that making clients feel special was literally his job, yet I couldn't help responding to the apparent sincerity in his words. The rehearsal dinner that evening was more intimate than the welcome reception, limited to family and close friends. Seated at a table with several of my colleagues and their partners, Damien once again proved his worth, effortlessly joining conversations about architecture, travel, and the upcoming wedding. What I hadn't anticipated was how convincingly he would portray someone gradually falling for me. It wasn't just the expected physical touches or verbal endearments, but the way his eyes lingered on me when I was speaking to others, the attentive tilt of his head when I shared an opinion, the gentle teasing that suggested comfortable intimacy. During dessert, when I was deep in conversation with a colleague about a challenging project, I felt Damien's hand settle warmly on my knee beneath the table, a private gesture invisible to others. The unexpected contact sent a jolt of awareness through me, and when I glanced at him, the affection in his expression seemed too genuine to be merely professional. Later, as we walked back to our suite under a sky brilliant with stars, Damien maintained our couple performance with a hand lightly resting at the small of my back. The night air was cool with early autumn, the vineyard quiet except for the distant sound of music from the resort bar. You've certainly convinced Richard, Damien observed. He told me he's never seen you so relaxed at a work function. Did he? I was surprised. What else did he say? Damien smiled. That I should encourage you to take more vacation days. Apparently, you have quite a few accumulated. That sounds like Richard, I admitted, always concerned about work-life balance while simultaneously expecting total commitment to projects. The eternal contradiction of caring bosses, Damien agreed. Though in this case, I think his concern is genuine. We reached our suite, the transition from public performance to private reality creating a moment of awkwardness as the door closed behind us. Would you like the bathroom first? Damien offered, already moving toward his bag to retrieve nightclothes. Go ahead, I said, needing a moment alone to sort through the confusing emotions of the evening. While he was in the bathroom, I stepped onto our private balcony, letting the cool air clear my head. The vineyard stretched before me, rows of vines barely visible in the moonlight, the mountains a dark silhouette against the star-filled sky. It was objectively romantic, the setting, the occasion, the presence of an attractive man who had spent the evening gazing at me with apparent adoration. The fact that it was all an illusion, a service I had purchased, felt increasingly difficult to reconcile with my growing attraction to Damien. Not just physical attraction, though that was certainly present, but a deeper appreciation for his intelligence, his observant nature, the glimpses of genuine personality that occasionally emerged through his professional persona. Beautiful night, Damien said quietly, joining me on the balcony. He had changed into lounge pants and a soft t-shirt, his feet bare, hair slightly tousled. The casual intimacy of his appearance created a different kind of tension between us. It is, I agreed, turning back to the view. Tomorrow's the actual wedding. One more day of our charade. I hadn't meant it to sound so pointed, but something in Damien's expression suggested the words had landed with unexpected weight. Does it bother you? He asked after a moment. The performative nature of this. The question deserved honesty. Increasingly, yes. Not because you're doing anything wrong. You're perfect, actually. Too perfect. I hesitated, struggling to articulate the complex emotions. It's just strange to experience what feels like connection while knowing it's professional rather than personal. Damien nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. The boundaries become blurry sometimes. For both parties. There was something in his tone that made me look at him more closely. Both parties. He leaned against the balcony railing, his profile outlined against the night sky. Skylar, I maintain professional boundaries with all my clients. It's essential for this work. But that doesn't mean I don't sometimes experience genuine enjoyment of someone's company or real attraction. He turned to face me directly. The affection I've shown you this weekend isn't entirely performance. The admission hung between us, shifting the atmosphere into something new and uncertain. I struggled to process what he was saying, that some of the warmth I'd responded to had been authentic, that the connection I'd felt might not be entirely one-sided. I'm not telling you this to complicate things, Damien continued when I remained silent, and I would never act on it during a professional engagement. But since you expressed discomfort with the performative aspect, I thought honesty might help. I appreciate the honesty, I finally managed. But it does complicate things. He smiled slightly. Life is complicated. We're people first, client and companion second. The simplicity of his statement cut through my confusion. We were indeed people. Complex, contradictory, capable of developing unexpected connections even in unlikely circumstances. What happens after tomorrow? I asked, the question emerging before I could reconsider it. Damien maintained his direct gaze. Professionally, our contract ends. We go our separate ways, and if you ever need my services again, you can book through the agency. He paused. Personally, that would be up to us. If you wanted to explore whatever this is outside of a professional context, I would be open to that. But there would be no expectation or obligation. The clear separation he outlined between professional arrangement and potential personal connection eased some of my concerns. You've done this before? Dated former clients? No, he said, surprising me. It's generally against my personal policy, but exceptions exist for a reason. The implication that I might be that exception created a warmth that had nothing to do with the pleasant temperature of the evening. Let's get through tomorrow, I suggested, not ready to make decisions, but unwilling to close the door on possibility. See how we feel when we're back in the real world. Damien nodded, accepting this middle ground. A sensible approach. He straightened from the railing. I should let you get some rest. Big day tomorrow. As he turned to go inside, I found myself reaching for his arm, stopping him. Damien. He looked back, a question in his eyes. Thank you, I said simply, for the honesty, and for making this weekend much better than I anticipated. His smile, then, was entirely genuine, warming his features in a way that made my heart beat faster. You're welcome, Skylar. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the kind of autumn day that photographers dream about. The ceremony was scheduled for late afternoon, leaving the morning and early afternoon free for guests to relax or participate in optional activities. Damien and I chose a hike through the Vineyard Hills, joining a small group led by the property's naturalist. The physical activity and beautiful scenery provided a welcome distraction from the complicated emotional territory we'd entered the night before. We maintained a friendly but slightly more reserved dynamic, both seemingly aware that we were reassessing boundaries. The wedding itself was beautiful, Elizabeth radiant in a classic gown, her soon-to-be husband looking at her with undisguised adoration as they exchanged vows against a backdrop of golden vines and distant mountains. During the ceremony, Damien sat beside me, our shoulders occasionally touching, his presence both comforting and unsettling in its impermanence. At the reception, we continued our couple performance with practiced ease, though something had shifted subtly. The touches seemed more deliberate, the glances more meaningful, the entire charade infused with an awareness that parts of it might not be pretense after all. During the first dance, Richard approached our table, champagne in hand. You two should join them, he suggested, nodding toward the dance floor where couples were now joining the newlyweds. Before I could formulate a polite decline, Damien stood and extended his hand to me. Shall we? The expectant look from Richard left little room for refusal. I took Damien's hand and allowed him to lead me to the dance floor, where he smoothly pulled me into a traditional dance frame, his right hand warm against my back. You dance too? I asked, only half joking as we moved together with surprising coordination. Another useful skill in this line of work, he replied with a small smile. Though I actually learned as a teenager. My grandmother insisted. Smart woman. I murmured, acutely aware of our physical proximity, the subtle cologne he wore, the strength in his hand against my back. She was, he agreed, seamlessly guiding me through a turn. She would have liked you, I think. The personal detail, the reference to his family, the suggestion that I might have met them in some alternate reality, created an ache of longing for something that wasn't really mine to want. Damien, I began, not entirely sure what I intended to say. He met my gaze, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. Yes. Before I could continue, the music changed to a faster tempo, breaking the moment. We separated slightly, laughing at the abrupt shift, and joined the more energetic dancing now taking over the floor. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of toasts, cake cutting, and celebration. Through it all, Damien remained the perfect companion, attentive, charming, creating the impression of a relationship that everyone around us seemed to envy. By the time we returned to our suite, emotionally and physically exhausted from the long day, the line between performance and reality had never felt more blurred. One more night, Damien said quietly as we entered the room. Then back to reality tomorrow. The reminder was gentle but clear. Our arrangement had a definite endpoint, regardless of any complicated feelings that had developed. Do you need the bathroom first? I asked, retreating to the safety of practical concerns. He shook his head. Go ahead. I'll set up the sofa bed. When I emerged from the bathroom, Damien was sitting on the edge of the now unfolded sofa bed, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as I approached, setting the device aside. Successful wedding, he observed. Elizabeth and Nicholas seemed genuinely happy. They did, I agreed, sitting on the edge of the regular bed, facing him across the room. And everyone believed we were a couple. Mission accomplished. Damien studied me for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Is that all you wanted from this weekend? For people to believe we were together? The question cut to the heart of something I'd been avoiding examining too closely. Initially, yes. It was about avoiding awkward questions and having someone to navigate social obligations with. I hesitated, then added, but now I'm not sure. What are you unsure about? His voice was gentle, encouraging rather than demanding. I took a deep breath, deciding that honesty was the only way forward. I've enjoyed your company, not just as a professional companion, but as a person. And that complicates things because I can't separate what might be genuine connection from what I've essentially purchased. Damien nodded slowly. I understand that concern. It's valid. He seemed to consider his words carefully before continuing. What if we created a clean break? Complete our professional arrangement as planned. Take some time apart with no contact, and then, if you're interested, start fresh. No money involved, no performance, just two people who met at a wedding deciding to get coffee. The suggestion was appealing in its simplicity, offering a potential path forward that acknowledged the complicated beginning without being defined by it. How much time? I asked. A month, he suggested. Long enough to create separation between the professional relationship and whatever might come after. I considered this. And after a month? If you're still interested, you could contact me at my personal number, not through the agency. He smiled slightly. And if you're not interested, no harm done. We had a successful professional engagement, and that's the end of the story. The framework he proposed offered a way to reset the power dynamic, to move from client and service provider to potential equals. It was thoughtful and respectful, addressing my concerns without dismissing them. That seems reasonable, I said, relieved to have a clear path forward. A month, then we reassess. Damien nodded, a mix of emotions crossing his features. Good. That's settled then. He hesitated, then added, for what it's worth, Skylar, I've enjoyed this weekend far more than any other professional engagement I've had. Whatever happens, or doesn't happen, after our month apart, I'm glad we met. The sincerity in his voice made my chest tighten with emotion I wasn't prepared to examine. I am too, I admitted, even if it was under unusual circumstances. We said goodnight soon after, each retreating to our separate beds with the weight of possibility hanging between us. The drive back to the city the next day was comfortable but tinged with a certain wistfulness. We discussed the wedding, shared observations about various guests, and carefully avoided any mention of our agreement to reconnect, or not, in a month's time. When I dropped Damien at his apartment building, our goodbye was appropriately professional. He thanked me for the opportunity to work with me. I thanked him for his exceptional service, and we parted with a handshake that lingered just slightly longer than necessary. 1 month. He reminded me quietly before stepping away from the car. 1 month, I confirmed, watching in the rearview mirror as he entered his building without looking back. The weeks that followed were busier than usual. I threw myself into work, taking on a challenging new project that required long hours and intense focus. Occasionally, I found myself thinking about Damien, wondering what he was doing, whether he was accompanying someone else to an event, if he thought about our weekend together. But I respected our agreement, making no attempt to contact him before the designated time. Richard mentioned him once, about 2 weeks after the wedding. "Your Damien made quite an impression," he commented as we reviewed design plans. "Marion keeps asking when we'll see him again." I mumbled something non-committal about busy schedules, uncomfortable with the reminder of our manufactured relationship. Richard seemed to interpret my discomfort as privacy concerns, nodding understandingly before returning to the blueprints before us. As the 1-month mark approached, I found myself increasingly uncertain. The connection I'd felt with Damien had been real, at least on my end, but I couldn't shake the awareness of how we'd met. Would a relationship that began as a transaction ever truly escape that origin? Could we build something authentic from such an artificial beginning? The night before our agreed reconnection date, I sat in my apartment staring at my phone, Damien's personal number, which he'd texted me from his car before we parted, displayed on the screen. My finger hovered over the call button for several minutes before I set the phone aside, still undecided. The next morning, I woke to a text message. "No pressure either way. Whatever you decide is perfectly fine. D." The simple message, sent exactly 1 month after our parting, demonstrated again the thoughtfulness that had drawn me to him. He was giving me space to make my decision without guilt or obligation, respecting whatever choice I made. I stared at the message for a long time before finally typing a response. "Coffee? Artisan's Brew on 7th, 2 p.m. His reply came almost immediately. "I'll be there." I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early, selecting a quiet table near the window and ordering a black coffee to calm my inexplicable nerves. This wasn't a date, I reminded myself. Just a conversation to see if there was something worth exploring beyond our unusual introduction. At exactly 2 p.m., Damien walked through the door. He was dressed casually in jeans and a gray sweater, looking both familiar and somehow new in this context, away from the wedding venue and the role he'd been playing. He spotted me immediately, a smile warming his features as he approached. "Hello, Skylar." "Hi," I replied, suddenly unsure how to proceed now that we were face to face. "Would you like some coffee?" "It's on me. I can buy my own coffee," he said gently, setting his jacket on the back of the chair. "That's rather the point of this meeting, isn't it? Equal footing." He was right, of course. Fair enough. But I insist on getting the next round. His smile widened. "Deal." Once he had returned with his drink, an Americano with a splash of cream, we fell into conversation that was initially hesitant, but gradually eased into something more natural. He told me about a short trip he'd taken to visit his sister in Chicago. I shared details about my new project, and we carefully navigated around the elephant in the room. Finally, after about 20 minutes of pleasant but somewhat superficial exchange, Damien set his cup down and met my gaze directly. "Should we address the obvious?" he suggested. "I think we're both dancing around it." I nodded, relieved that he had taken the initiative. "Yes, we probably should." "I like you, Skylar," he said simply. "I enjoyed our weekend together beyond the professional aspects. I find you intelligent, thoughtful, and genuinely interesting to talk to. I'm attracted to you, and I think there might be potential for something meaningful between us." He paused. "But I also understand if you can't get past how we met. It's an unusual beginning, and not everyone could move forward from it." His directness was refreshing, cutting through the awkwardness with simple honesty. "I've been thinking about that a lot," I admitted. "Whether it's possible to build something real from such an artificial start. And what conclusion did you reach?" I considered my answer carefully. That unusual beginnings don't necessarily predict the story that follows. That connection is rare enough that dismissing it because of circumstance seems foolish. I met his gaze. "I like you too, Damien. As a person, not as a service provider. And I'd like to see if there's something here worth exploring. The smile that spread across his face then was unlike any I'd seen during our weekend together. Utterly genuine, unguarded, reaching his eyes in a way that transformed his features. "I'd like that too," he said. "Though I should be upfront about something." "What's that?" "I've left the companion service," he revealed. "Gave notice right after our weekend together." This surprised me. "Because of what happened between us." "Partly," he acknowledged. "But also because I've been considering it for a while. I've saved enough to focus on my own business venture, a boutique event planning service I've been developing on the side." The timing just happened to coincide with our situation. The knowledge that he had made this significant career change shortly after our weekend together added another layer to consider. "That's a big step." "It was time," he said simply. "The companion work was always meant to be temporary while I built towards something of my own." We talked for another hour, the conversation flowing more naturally as we established this new dynamic between us. When we finally left the cafe, walking together through the crisp autumn afternoon, there was a tentative but unmistakable sense of possibility between us. "Would you like to have dinner next weekend?" I asked as we prepared to part ways. "A proper date, not a professional engagement." Damien smiled, the expression warming his eyes in that way I'd come to appreciate. "I'd like that very much." He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted, and placed a gentle kiss on my cheek. The simple gesture held more genuine intimacy than any of our performed affection during the wedding weekend. "I'll call you," he promised, stepping back. "And Skylar, thank you for giving this a chance." As I watched him walk away, I reflected on the strange path that had led us here, from a desperate solution to a social dilemma to the potential beginning of something meaningful. It wasn't a conventional start to a relationship, but perhaps that made it all the more valuable for the intentionality it required from both of us. Whatever happened next, we were entering it with open eyes and honest hearts. No performance, no professional boundaries, just two people choosing to explore a connection that had emerged from unexpected circumstances. Sometimes, I realized, the most authentic relationships begin in the least likely places.